All right, gonna be doing the corn and soybean end of summer update. I'm gonna try not to make this an hour-long video, but I'm gonna go into pretty good detail and show all the different corn and soybean plots I have. Just for future years, I can reference it and look back and see what I had this in 2024. So I'm gonna start out right here with these first two cornfields. I'll get some aerial drone footage to show kind of which field I'm talking about as I'm explaining it, but these are the first two corn areas we planted this year. It was like early May. This stuff was over my head by July 1st. It was really taking off fast. We did get a little bit of root lodging right around middle of July, where it kind of folded a lot of the plants over, but they actually recovered within less than a week, and then there's been no issues since. But this wetter field down here on the other side of the brush pile, that area has quite a bit of that got a whole bunch of standing water in it on one of them heavy rains. And we had quite a bit of root lodging, and the plants are still kind of crisscrossed all over the place down there. So right here, so everything to the left is the 100-day field corn. And like I said, I had 2 rows of silage corn. I pretty much used up that seed. That was like 3-year-old seed, but it all came up and germinated just fine. You can see the silage corn's a little bit taller than the field corn, these 2 rows. And then this way, all the way out to the end is NutriCrave. And I got 2 rows of the 108-day NutriCrave here left over from last year. I had just a little bit of seed left. I planted that about halfway through the field, and then I had to throw in the 100-day NutriCrave and plant the rest of it. So these 2 rows only go down about halfway. This is about probably 100 to 125 yard long field. Only about like 16 rows wide, something like that. I'll pick off some of these ears and we'll kind of compare too. But like I said last year, and this NutriCrave is definitely smaller seed, and it runs through the planter about as thick as you'd want to. I mean, you wouldn't want it any thicker than this. This is probably too thick. I mean, that's why I had issues. It's dropping 2 seeds at once. I started using a different plate that didn't plant it quite so thick, but it still was putting it in pretty thick on some of my other fields out there. But you can see this is clearly dropping more seed than what I wanted to. But you look in here, all these plants have a decent sized ear. I mean, they're not huge, but some of them are pretty good sized. And for being as thick as what this is, I think these plants turned out pretty good this year. I mean, obviously we've had unlimited moisture. This corn never once shriveled up the whole summer. The driest stretch we had was just recently, like 2 weeks without rain. The ground's all wet now. We just got 1.5 inches like a day or 2 ago. And then you come over here, look at how much more sunlight's getting in here. This is the 100-day field corn. Now granted, there is some coon damage over here. And I should point that out. All these areas that I have this NutriCrave and 100-day field corn side by side, the coons always attack the field corn harder, and the deer always silk the ears and eat on the leaves of the field corn harder. That's 2 years in a row with 2 different field corn varieties next to basically the NutriCrave side by side, and the deer do not eat on the NutriCrave. The raccoons, now if that's all you have, if all you had was a field of NutriCrave, then yeah, you'd probably experience some coon damage and some deer damage, but having it side by side, it's really noticeable. Not so much in this plot, but in other plots closer to where the deer are bedding. But there is quite a bit of raccoon damage coming up this way, and they're only in the field corn. But granted, field corn is closer to this brushy line fence, so I mean, there's raccoons technically everywhere around here. There's another line fence right over there. They could have been getting at the NutriCrave on that side, but they're not. Anyways, field corn looks pretty good. Maybe slightly bigger ears, but that's just because, this is definitely a thinner population. There should be at least 2 more plants in there. That's what you want. You want like 6 to 8 inch spacing. There should be another plant in there. So this field corn just never gets planted quite as thick as what I'd like to get it planted. But surprisingly, not too many of these plants in here put on 2 years. I figured being kind of thinner like this, I thought more of these plants would have developed the second year, but I don't see too many second year plants in here. Maybe I mean, I didn't fertilize it like crazy. I just put down some 9-23-31, no extra nitrogen after that. So maybe that's another reason why this corn turned out good, but probably not as good as what it could have been if I would have had it like really well fertilized. And then here's those 2 rows of silage corn. It's a little bit greener yet. Same thing. The seed's a little bit smaller. It runs through the planter a little thicker. But the husks always stay on these plants real hard. The deer have a hard time getting at these kernels when these ears dry down, because like I said, the husk is real hard to peel back. But yeah, there's some really nice ears in here, probably bigger than the field corn, probably bigger than the NutriCrave. There's some real monster ears right in here. I'll pick off a real big silage corn, a real nice field corn, a real big NutriCrave corn, and I'll head over to the brush pile plot, that wetter plot down there. So one thing I have noticed, I'm in these first 2 rows of the NutriCrave, and it's definitely drying down a little bit faster, being about a week faster in maturity. Like you can clearly see the 108 is a little bit more greener. This stuff's drying down, but then again, this stuff is kind of competing with each other. It's got those nice reddish orange kernels on the NutriCrave. But yeah, this has definitely got a little bigger ears. I wouldn't say it's just because it's 108 day. I'd say it's just because it's planted thinner. The whole field should have been about like this, not like this. When you plant really thick like this, you're really taking a chance. I mean, it's not the way I intended it to. I think I found a different plate that it didn't quite plant the NutriCrave as thick as this. It was more like this, a different plate I ended up using halfway through the season, because after this stuff came up, I seen how thick it was. But it's amazing how well this stuff did produce still. I mean, there's some ears in here that are pretty good size at my head. And then all these smaller ears, all these plants develop ears. I mean, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's like 7 ears right in like 1.5 feet. So I don't know what this stuff would yield, but it's got to be pretty darn good considering how thick it is, and every plant in here's got a decent ear. All right, so here's a quick look. This is the 100-day NutriCrave, 108-day NutriCrave. I mean, it could be a little bit bigger growing corn, 7 more or 8 more days of maturity, but like I said, this stuff was planted a little bit thinner. I don't know if maybe we had 80% germination, where this stuff had like 95-100% germination, so it ended up being a little thinner. That could be why it, and I remember I took the biggest of the biggest. I just looked around in a little area and found the biggest one I could find in each one of these varieties. So 100-day, 108-day from last year, and then here is the field corn 100-day. And I'm not sure what this silage corn is, but this is the silage corn. I pretty much have none of this seed. Like I said, this was 3-year-old seed too. And again, we probably had about 75-80% germination. This stuff used to be about as thick as what this 100-day NutriCrave is. But anyways, pretty nice size ears, all of them real girthy, pretty good length. This is going to be a heck of a, like I said, these fields never dried up once, and I probably could have put even more side dress nitrogen on. I didn't, but I'm really happy with how this produced. This is about a 1/2 acre plot. So believe it or not, I actually had 18 kernels around on the 100-day NutriCrave and only 14 on the 108-day. But you look at this, and this 108-day NutriCrave, the kernels are definitely wider and just overall bigger. So, I mean, you can count them up and whatever, but that doesn't really mean it's a higher yield. I mean, it all goes by weight. This is the field corn. This was 18 around, and the silage corn was 16 around. Silage corn probably has slightly bigger kernels, so that's why it's 2 less rows around. But all in all, pretty similar results between all 4 varieties of corn. I'm really happy with how everything grew this year. Especially this field. This is my best looking corn out of all. Well, I got some pretty good looking corn in other areas too, but this is some of the best stuff. I'm gonna take you down to the brush pile plot now. So on this side by the grass here was the small section that I had the rye seeded in from last year. I did a couple rows here of no-till. I just drilled right into the rye, crushed all the rye down. Again, that was early May when I planted this. The rye was only barely as tall as this grass, is about shin high. Looks like we're getting some coon or deer damage on some of them already. You can kind of see the rye thatch in here, but like I said, the thatch was pretty small, so when the rye is smaller, it's not as stocky, so it decomposes quite fast. And this is a lot thinner in here than what I wanted it to be, because I think, you know, our planter is not a true no-till planter, so I was able to get about 75% of the seed in the seed trench, and the seed trench closed, but there was definitely some spotty areas in here where not everything came up, but most of it looks pretty good. And we got quite a few weeds in here too. This is all pretty much the 100-day field corn right here. And it switches over to NutriCrave right about here. And then this going all the way over is the tilled side. And immediately once we get into the NutriCrave and in the tilled section, we start getting more root lodging issues. See how they're all tipped over kinda? Thankfully this happened, you know, like it actually happened after it was already pollinated, because it was like a late July rain, and there was a couple times where there was like multiple inches of standing water right where I'm standing now. The deepest, it was probably like ankle deep in here. This has actually got some old drain tile in this little wet spot, and it runs down to a ditch down there, so it drains off within like literally a day or two. But it was just enough to get the ground really saturated, and these corn plants ended up tipping over, because it's, well, they didn't tip, well, they tipped over, and some of them were able to prop back up. So they all these ears filled out good. We got good pollination on everything. It's just kind of a messier field now. And obviously the reason why it tipped over is because all this ground was tilled here, and it was planted. This NutriCrave was planted definitely too thick here, and that's why we got root lodging issues. But I have the same issues over here into the field corn. Now I'm in the field corn right here, and there's still quite a bit of plants leaning all over the place. And this is probably the worst section right down in here. These plants were pretty much practically on the ground, and you can see how much sunlight's getting in here now, and some of them were able to prop back up, but pretty much the whole ear's filled out. Like I said, it all happened like right after everything pollinated. The tassels were already out, so if it would have happened earlier in the year, they might have been able to recover as well, maybe even a little better. But the worst time for them to get root lodged is right before they pollinate, right as the tassels just poking out, because then you're not going to get very good pollination, because the plants are laying on the ground. So like I said, about another ½ acre here. I do have a couple rows of the silage corn. I'm not going to pick any of these ears. I just picked those ones over there. This is definitely a lot wetter area than the other field we were just in, but kind of similar ground, dirt. This is the silage corn right here, and you can see we got tons of root lodging over here too. There must have been some strong winds when the ground was completely saturated. I mean, look at how messy this is. Just corn laying all over the place. I mean, you can't even really tell where the rows are in here, because it's just corn everywhere, leaning every different direction. But it did produce, and there's lots of grain in here, so that's the main thing. So just back there is where all that root lodging was. You get up to this maybe about 6 to 8 inches higher in elevation, and then this corn's fine. It didn't tip over at all right here. Still quite a bit of weeds in here. And this corn looks about the same as the other field. And like I said, this is on like a drier year. This field would look definitely better, because it's quite a bit wetter here. But on this year being so wet, even the drier fields look just as good as the wetter fields, because some of my wet fields, you'll see later in the update, got way too much rain, and the corn's just way behind what it should be, like on a normal year. All right, so this next plot right here is the Field of Dreams plot. The last couple of years I would usually make a video on this. I never did upload a video of planting this plot. This is a pretty strategic planting right here. So I got all this beautiful stand of NutriCrave right in front of the deer blind. Can't really see it because it's hidden in all that buckthorn and cedar trees. I'm gonna have to snap off some of these stalks to be able to shoot out here a little bit. The NutriCrave did really good up on this drier ground, but the wettest part of the field is on this corner right here. I'll show you that later. The corn's noticeably shorter and there was standing water down there on and off. That corner down there is definitely wetter than that brush pile plot, and the excess water definitely stunted the corn on that half, but it looks great up here. Just huge ears. And then I got these brassica travel lanes planted with the no-till buckwheat. I will have a video of that coming out eventually, so you'll see more of the brassicas here in the planting process probably in a couple weeks when I get that video out. And the rest of this field was all soybeans and a couple of corn screening walls from that deer blind, our box blind up there. You can see the corn's kind of covering these. It's kind of too tall almost, but you really shoot into all these little openings with gun season or late season. You'll be able to just see them coming, and they'll be feeding around in here if we're still hunting out here late season. The reason why I wanted to plant this corn in here too is just to add a lot of extra tonnage. I mean, these beans didn't really come up the greatest, so now I got brassicas that I spread across this whole bean area too. They never really quite canopied over, didn't come in thick enough, but they're just absolutely loaded with pods. I mean, some of these plants, like look at this, they're as thick as my thumb. The stem is as thick as my thumb, and they're all branched out, and there's just like pods growing everywhere on these things. And I did plant this field probably like late May, I think, so these beans should stay green for another week, maybe probably two weeks at least. A lot of the farmers' bean fields around here are already turning. So I broadcasted all these beans. This is probably only about 3/4 of an acre of beans. And then I came through and with my 1-row push planter, I planted these couple rows of corn. And that's why this field corn got planted actually a little bit thicker, probably like what it should be planted at. This is definitely thicker than what our 2-row planter plants. That's probably another reason why not too many of these plants in here have 2 ears. If I would have planted this with our 2-row planter, it would have probably been a lot thinner, and a lot of these plants in here, the second ear would have developed. But planting this corn on these just blocks of whatever 3 to 5 rows, the corn generally does really good because they're all essentially end rows. They're both, you know, the corn is just getting a lot of extra sunlight versus being in the middle of a giant field. So these beans are almost waist high. I'm not going to pick any off and count them like I have in the past, but you can see they're absolutely loaded. And this bean plot looked very, very pathetic in the beginning. Like, they've grown quite a bit in the last month here. They really bushed out. For the first month and a half, I was almost considering just ripping it all up and just doing all brassica, because it took them forever to even, you know, canopy over and you know, branch out a little bit, and they're still not really canopied over. They never will, but the whole plot would have been nice if it would have looked like this. This would have been a ton of pods out here. This is like one of the few spots that I actually had them thick enough where they canopied over. But anyways, it's gonna work out because now I got brassicas, corn, and soybeans all literally within 5 feet of each other. Looks like we are starting to get some coon damage in here. This is probably from coons since the corn's in the ground. I'm surprised I didn't end up with more coon damage because literally all the neighbors' fields, the closest fields to this field, are all soybeans this year. And I thought I was gonna definitely get more coon damage than what I've had already. I mean, this is some of the first coon damage I've seen all summer. You can see all this stuff is still standing upright. So I'm thankful that the coons didn't mess with it, you know, as it was growing cobs, but now it's starting to dry down. It's looking like it's gonna be a pretty good plot. You can see I got all these brassicas up here and this super thin section right here. These beans being super thin like this is, like when they drop their leaves and dry down, it's gonna look like, you know, like really bare. It already looks really bare because there's hardly any beans in here. So my plan was I'm gonna probably seed this whole upper section where it's dry, everything but where that really thick NutriCrave is on that low end. The whole plot's gonna get seeded with rye probably in the next 2 weeks here, and I'm gonna do this entire field basically into primarily beans again next year, but I'm gonna no-till it into the standing rye, and the rye is about waist to like chest high. I'll just broadcast it into it. So this whole plot's gonna get overseeded with rye on top of everything that's already growing here, the brassica, the beans, and the corn. So it should be a pretty phenomenal food source out here. In all honesty, these couple rows of corn, I got like 1, 2, 3, I got 5 screening walls of corn. That corn is probably going to provide just as much food, or almost just as much food, as the rest of these beans combined. But it's hard to say because these beans do look pretty good in certain sections. They're like fully canopied over in small areas out here. Got lots of water hemp coming in here, so that kind of sucks. I've been hand pulling some of these after I planted the brassicas because I couldn't, you know, spray any more after that. And even before that, you know, this water hemp is no joke. This is probably, I'm amazed how clean this plot actually looks, because in the past I've just had water hemp and lamb's quarters out of control in my beans in this specific plot right here. It's been a pretty weedy plot in the past. So this year actually looks pretty good considering some other years. So here's some of that field corn damage I was talking about. Obviously this is like pretty close to where the deer come out. This is pretty much all from deer right here. They munched off this entire outer row of corn. And in other areas, and the next upcoming plots I'll show you too, it's even worse than this. And the NutriCrave is untouched. All of that down there is untouched by the deer. We'll cut through here. And I got these rows pretty thick. This is probably a 20-inch row right here. And all these plants have just full of decent ears, because it's just getting extra sunlight on both sides. Same thing, got brassicas scattered throughout all this. And the last row of corn, last screening wall of corn's down there. And then you can see that NutriCrave is almost like a lighter green. It always tends to it seems like it actually dries down and just turns yellowish brown a little faster than the field corn does. Field corn's still nice and dark green. Lots of weeds in here. It's not ideal, but they are obviously munching on the weeds. People say, oh, weeds are good in food plots. Gotta offer diversity, but that's gonna be brown and dead as soon as middle of October starts, and that's when you really want to start attracting deer, especially the does, to get them over here every night. Anyways, the NutriCrave was way better up there. Down here there was occasional standing water, so it stunted this corn, and that's why it's noticeably shorter. I mean, I can almost reach the tops of the tassels, but there still is some pretty decent ears on here on some of them, but on the majority of the ones in here, see, that's an end row getting more sunlight. See how much bigger that is? You go in one row and these ears shrink down significantly. And I never did, this is non-GMO Roundup Ready, non-GMO NutriCrave corn. I never did cultivate this with our cultivator. All I did was, the only weed control in here was the day I planted. I mixed up about half Simazine and some Prowl H2O for a pre-emerge on this corn. And the weeds that came up are pretty much the only weeds that came up. I never did, you know, I guess I could have sprayed with 2,4-D, but I don't like doing that on the corn because I've had bad experiences in the past. But no other weed control other than the day of planting in this field of corn. And this is how good it looks. I'm pretty surprised. And this is later in the year, I used that different plate, so it didn't plant the NutriCrave quite as thick, which is good. You can see we got a lot more consistent spacing. couple thick spots, but overall it's definitely a little bit thinner than the earlier areas I planted with a different plate. Got a little bit too thick in some of those earlier planted areas. And just look at how much taller it is in here. The weed control is even better here because this corn grew up and canopied over so much faster. So yeah, this is gonna be a lot of food right here just in this one plot. All those other plots I showed you are just literally 100 to 200 yards that way. All right, so this is the plot I call the Swampy wet field. It's always the wettest food plot we plant, and this year I was lucky to even get it planted. That's how wet it was. And we've had standing water in this plot I don't know how many times, probably not recently, but throughout June and July, probably at least 3 or 4 times. And this field is not tiled, so it stays pretty saturated when you do get standing water in here for multiple days. And you can see how short this corn is. It's literally about 6 foot to the tops of the tassels. Some of them are a little taller. You can see the stuff on the edge where it literally goes up about 6 to 8 inches and maybe a foot in elevation. It's almost full height right there, and pretty good ears. And then it drops off immediately when it gets, look at this, boom, right down. Plants are actually turned out better than what I thought they would, because man, they were like waist high, like, and it looked like they were going to start tasseling soon, and they were able to get up a little bit. This last month has been a little bit drier than the first 2 months, because man, June and July was just terribly wet out here. August has been definitely drier, which is good. It's helped this corn out probably a little bit, but it's just stunted from the beginning. And all this corn, the whole middle of the field here, is only about 6 to 7 feet tall. And last year being a dry year, a pretty dry year actually, this was all like 10, 11 foot tall corn. My best looking corn I planted anywhere. I had NutriCrave ears in here like the size of my forearm. I mean, the corn was just phenomenal in here last year. So that's 4 rows of NutriCrave. Then I got 4 rows of field corn. The wettest, going up this way, it looks pretty good, but I turn around and this is about the wettest part of the field right here. From here, basically to the end. And this stuff is about 5 to 6 feet tall. But there is definitely ears on here. So there'll be definitely some food for these deer. And last year the ears were like literally up at my head. They were like this high, and it was almost too high for the deer to get at them. This year they'll be covered in the snow. If we get some deep snows, that's how low these ears are going to be. They're going to be like at my shin when they dry down. But same thing here, only cultivated once, and this water has really suppressed a lot of these weeds too. I'm surprised. I figured, you know, I'd have weeds in here as tall as the corn, but you know, the corn being stunted because of all the water actually stunted a lot of the weeds too, and the weeds didn't grow that good. So I was sure I was going to have a real bad weed problem in this field, but it actually turned out all right. More brassicas. This area looks maybe a little better, but again, these brassicas were underwater like right after I planted them, so that didn't help either. I think that killed a lot of them in the middle here, and like these ruts. Anyways, I got 4 more rows of the NutriCrave, and then I got field corn to the end here. And there was a small section in here where I did no-till them, where I drilled them right in the old corn thatch and weed stubble. That's right here. So here's all the corn stalks from last year. You can see how thick these are. Look at the difference. And here's all the weeds that I sprayed off, you know, before I drilled it in. So this was an area that I was planning on doing brassicas, but I just ended up drilling a couple extra rows of corn right through here. I probably could have got away with just no-tilling the whole field like this, because I mean, it did come up pretty good and there's really no difference side by side, but I didn't know if it was going to work or not, because like I said, our planter's not a true no-till planter, and This ground is soft enough. It was able to cut through it and close the seed trench, and we got pretty good germination even on this no-till row. And everything looks about the same. So yeah, there's definitely going to be plenty of food out here for them, but probably only a third of the yield that we had in here last year. So, but it actually did turn out better than I thought, considering how bad it looked. I'll put up some pictures from earlier in the year, and man, it was just really stunted, and I didn't think it was going to turn out this good, but it actually turned out okay. We got pretty good ears in here, and some of these, and it just gets drier as we go up towards the Trump plot, which will be the next plot I'm going to show you. If you guys remember seeing the video on that, and I'm going to have drone footage of all these plots right at the end of this video. So yeah, this NutriCraven here is looking really good. It just keeps getting drier as we work our way up towards this next field here. And the corn's getting taller. So yeah, there's actually quite a bit of corn in here. And here we are. This is the Trump plot. These are my best looking soybeans I grew anywhere, at home, here. These are the best looking soybeans I've grown probably in 2 years. Last year I did you know, the 38-inch row beans. I tried cultivating them for weed problems. Well, this year I fixed that, and I just over broadcasted like a ton of seed to get fast canopy closure. And I said screw the cultivating, because on those wide rows they never did quite canopy over. Although I did get a nice stand of brassicas in there doing the cultivating. I was able to, you know, seed the brassicas the last time I cultivated, and I got beans and brassicas all in one. But here, broadcasting and putting down the Prowl H2O for a pre-emerge definitely is my way to is my way I'm going to do it next year. I mean, these are some of the best beans I've grown on this property, period. They're huge. I wish I could stand in there and get a video or whatever, but these things are literally waist high. Yeah, pretty much waist high beans. The deer have literally stopped walking through here. They're only walking along the edges and eating up right there where they're shorter, where they come out at all the time. But earlier in the year, there was deer tracks, and they were browsing on all this stuff in here. So this field alone is 1 acre, and you know, probably the whole thing's seeded into beans, but the beans in the letters of the Trump sign, they're not really amounting to much. But that corn alone right there did pretty good. I'll get up to some of that corn. We'll take a look at it. But yeah, this is a solid acre of pretty good beans. Obviously, this is the best area I'm in. I'll show you what they look like up on the top side of the plot, where it's a little sandier ground, and they're not quite this good. All right, so here we are on the corn. This was obviously all planted with the 1 row push planter. So this corn got planted at a pretty good rate, and it's all looking pretty good. It's really starting to dry down fast. This whole field was planted like early May, so that's why these beans should probably start drying, you know, turning yellow here in probably the next week and a half, I would assume. Yeah, this corn alone is going to really add a lot of food to this 1 acre. I mean, beans are great and all, but I mean, a really good crop of beans is still only going to produce a third of the yield of what a really good crop of corn would produce. So the beans are always gone so much quicker going, you know, throughout the winter than the corn is. The corn always lasts till March and then beyond if you got, you know, enough of it. And they were really using some of these like little trails between the letters quite a bit, and they still are. But like when the beans were shorter and they were actually walking through here like a lot, there were some real heavy trails right through this field and stuff. So up here they still look pretty darn good. I did come through here and spray some of the grasses with clethodim, because I did have a lot of grasses kind of survive. Some of them died, some of them are still alive, whatever, but the plot looks pretty darn good. And they're still putting on new pods way up at the top here. So yeah, I would assume this 1 acre is going to last them a pretty long time. I mean, I would assume by middle of February, or definitely the end of February, this is going to be getting pretty thin, if not completely gone. But yeah, we'll have corn down in that swamp field, and even some ears up here into mid-March for sure. I could probably, I'm gonna pick off a big bean plant. I'll pick one off from this drier side, and I'll pick one off from that really good stand on the lower side, and we'll count up how many pods, just to get a rough estimate. It's not really gonna help me predict the yield or anything, but just to get an idea, because I know I've grown some, you know, on a well canopied over crop of beans like this. You pick any random plant, you should hopefully have at least 60 to 100 pods to the plant if you're gonna, you know, get any sort of really good yield. If you got less than 40 on a good canopied over crop of beans, I don't know what the yield would be, but they're probably not going to last into the winter as long as you'd like them. A lot of times when they're real thin, you got patchy beans like that first field. Yeah, you're going to be able to find plants with almost 200 on them, because they're just making up for the lost space. Yeah, these beans up here probably only got like 40 at the most. I'll pick off one of these. And I'm gonna pick off one on that lower side where they're waist high and look great. All right, so here's the two plants. This is that one on the shorter side where the deer have been nipping them off more. And here's the one from that real good taller stand. This is not gonna have as many as I thought. They were, you know, they're so tall because they're competing with each other, but it actually looks like probably pretty similar. I'll pick them all off and count them up here. So believe it or not, we actually got 61 on the small plant, the short plant, and only 54 on this taller plant. Now I gotta remember that where I picked this taller one, it was full canopy, a ton of plants growing literally right on top of each other, really close, literally competing with each other. This was growing, you know, definitely, you know, lower population, some gaps here and there. And I did notice definitely probably a few more pods with 4 seeds in it on this taller plant. Both of them got a ton of these nodules. That's where when the soybean plant dies, I think these things are what release the nitrogen back into the ground for next year. Anyways, just a quick little comparison. All right, so this is the plot I call the shed plot. I didn't get any footage of planting the shed plot this year here. I did take some footage, but I never did compile it up and make a video out of it. And I did, the last time I sprayed it with Gly, I seeded some brassicas, so there's some scattered brassicas coming up in here as well. And I got basically a plus sign of corn, just breaking this up into 4 different little sections. The brassicas I spread in here didn't really come in that good, and the beans overtook most of them. And whenever you seed them right on like hard packed ground, you usually don't get the greatest take or pretty low germination rate. And here's another section of that 100-day corn that I was talking about, how the deer just completely chomp on it and just, I mean, they pretty much mowed their way right through this wall of corn. I mean, there's like 6 rows of corn here. I got pretty tight rows planted. And I did, you know, I had beans spread throughout the whole plot up to the brassicas here. And then I came in and planted these rows with the corn planter, because it's just kind of a lot. Nice straight rows. I just, instead of using the push planter, I used the corn planter to plant these. But anyways, not many ears in here are gonna be viable. This feels like it's pretty hit or miss, not the greatest pollination. There's a lot of gaps in there. So they pretty much, like I said, mowed their way right through here. Next year, I'm gonna do a similar thing. I'm probably gonna put brassicas down here in the middle, because then it goes up towards the hill on this side of the plot. And maybe if I do some screening walls, I'll put in like maybe like 4, maybe 6 rows of the NutriCrave, because the last 2 years when I had the American flag plot and this plot with the rows of corn, and the rows of soybeans. And then now this year, they've really hit this field corn really hard. I mean, right here, from here all the way down to the end, it's almost like a waste of space because they're not many ears are in there. They've pretty much destroyed it. But thankfully, they didn't get it all. There's definitely some corn in here. But I feel like if I do NutriCrave next year, they probably won't bother it as much, and I might actually get something out of it. And right here in the middle, it's really thick because I didn't pick up the planter when I crossed through here. So it's like planted on a checkerboard right here, and it's really thick right here in this little spot in the middle. And even in here, the plants did produce. And then going up this way, nice beautiful stand of beans. You can see how it just really dries up to pretty much nothing once it starts to go up the hill there. That's why next year I'm gonna seed the majority of this plot with rye as well. And I plan on doing a majority no-till planting in here next year with, again, a lot of soybeans. And I think on that top section up there, I might try to get some clover established, just something to cover up the ground, because I just keep getting little washout issues up there, and nothing ever grows good on that last 10 yards up there anyways. So I'm trying to get a perennial clover and just mow it once a year, if that. But yeah, there's definitely corn in here, and this being planted pretty thin and the deer chomping on it, there is quite a few plants in here with 2 ears on it. So, and I got beans scattered throughout all this. So this actually worked out really good, because where the deer ate off all the corn, the beans got enough sunlight to fill in and put on some pods. So it actually worked out pretty good. I'm glad I broadcasted the beans, and then, put the beans with the corn in here, because where the corn was thin, the beans filled it in. And again, this plot down in here, beans are practically waist high, just like the Trump plot. This is the best part of this field right here. Last year, like I said, I had almost half this plot into beans, but I had them on the wide rows, and they didn't really amount to much of anything, and they were pretty much gone by middle of December, so they didn't really replenish the soil too much and put too much nitrogen back in the ground. So that's why I wanted to do a lot of beans in here again. And I'm going to do at least one more year of a lot of beans before I do a giant corn crop in this field again. Look at how big and bushy this one is. I'm going to have that drone video at the end here. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hopefully it's not a crazy long video, but like I said, I like to go in depth on these updates for my future. I can look back and see what it all looks like this year, compare it to next year or whatever. And there's quite a bit of browse like right in here, man.
I don't recognize you anymore.